So originally, I never planned to talk about something called the Owl Moon Lab. I figured if I ever spoke about anything, it would be my desire to eventually be at a place like the Owl Moon Lab. And I'll explain what that name means later, but I'm just a guy that lives in Springfield, Oregon now, moved to Port Orchard, Washington with my girlfriend Erin Jackson. I got interested in this just basically finding some tracks with my son out in Springfield, Oregon. Those tracks ended into a conversation from a guy that actually did a documentary in Sisters, Oregon. And the documentary, I think, was based loosely on Bob Gimlin. And so when I talked to this guy about the tracks we found, he says, well, not so fast. It's not all a hoax. There is some legitimate stuff going on out there. And I took that conversation, kind of ran with it, went down the rabbit hole. And I think it's been about 12 years as far as me being immersed in the community here regarding looking into the phenomena. And so along the way, I've met some incredible folks like yourself who said, you know, this is not just a relic hominid, this is not just a primate. And, you know, as I mentioned in a podcast I have called Strange Brow Radio, the initial episode, I kind of explained the pretenses of going down this paranormal road. There's a price to be paid as far as losing credibility, you know, as if any of us have credibility at all, right? And when you're speaking about Sasquatch, so you have to be willing to climb up to the weird branches of the Bigfoot tree and start investigating them. And this is just one of those little weird branches, which is the Owl Moon Lab. And in short, the property I'm going to talk to you about today was kind of gifted to me through a husband and wife who own a plot of land in Cottage Grove, Oregon. And they moved there just based upon the fact that they heard about the London tracks, was a set of tracks that my son and I had found down in Cottage Grove, but may or may not be a legitimate trackway, but it started their conversation going because they'd already had Bigfoot testimonies and within their family. And Daryl and Cindy are the people I'm going to be alluding to later. In fact, there might be some audio of them talking about their property. Anyway, they moved incredibly close to where we found these 122 maybe Sasquatch prints. Everybody in Cottage Grove, just like I'm sure in Greenwater, knows about the phenomena. Most of them are locals, and they have different names for the phenomena. The locals in Cottage Grove don't call them Bigfoot at all. It's to save face. You don't want to be at the local bar talking about your Sasquatch encounter, so they call them salamanders. So if they have a salamander issue in the caves, or if they have a salamander issue out in the woods, it's a lot easier to talk about, you know, salamander infestation, rare salamanders this. So these code names aren't Native American names, they're the locals. So the salamanders out in Cottage Grove have been known to exist for quite some time. There's gold mines all around this town, lots of ore, lots of mercury flowing into Cottage Grove Lake, unfortunately. So there's lots of quartz and water. And I'll come back to maybe why that's important later, because when you're looking into the paranormal, you have to kind of look at geologically where you're at. And this is all stuff that I'm learning through the School of Hard Knocks. So, you know, you can get your street knowledge over a period of time, but this was baptism by fire, and most of it occurred over 90 days. And so, without further ado, let's talk about the Owl Moon Lab. It all started with these divots in the clay here. I don't know if anybody is, can everybody see? Everyone's good? Okay. So when I befriended this guy named Daryl Adams, he took me on an elk hunt and he drew a tag around March 30th to go on the backside of Cottage Grove and look for, I think, a cow elk. And we were going up the side of the road, and I was sitting in the passenger seat, and I said, Daryl, that looks interesting, pull over. So we backed up the truck, and I knew that Daryl was down to do some Bigfoot, and he kind of moved up there, for crying out loud, to look into the phenomena. But it was a beautiful March 30th, actually. It was Good Friday, and it was also a full moon, and I'll get to why that's important. So when we pulled over, we noticed what looked like, if you look to the right there where the dollar bill is, you can see what looks like maybe a soccer ball got punched down into the ground. Well, it looked interesting enough to kind of look like an appendage went down in the mud. So we got out and we started rolling camera. And what we found is that right along the skid road, there seemed to be a resting place for where something went down on its knees. And as we got closer there, we began to see what looked like animation and tissue, and maybe where bone had been sitting. And as we got even closer, we saw hairs sticking up. And those hairs were maybe an inch long. They were black in color. And I'd never seen a Sasquatch hair up close before, but I knew that as long as I was doing a podcast or trying to launch something, as a side gig, which I'm trying to do with Strange Brow Radio, I thought, well, this would be good content. Let's cast the whole thing, but before we do, let's treat it like the Skookum cast, let's take hair samples and run video and see if we can do as good a job or better as the guys that did the Skookum cast. So we immediately started rolling film and taking hair samples. And if you look down in here, I don't know if you can see that or not, I don't have a laser pointer, but maybe this thing will reach. If you look down here at the base, you'll see 3 different little strands of half-moon crescent-sized hairs sticking out. Those are the hairs I'm talking about. And then you can see the actual hair flow start to come down the left side slope. That would be the right knee. And I don't know if anybody got a chance to check out the knee prints that I brought yesterday, but it's rather apparent. There's some arrows there showing some of the hairs. Collected all those hairs here, and it was just a really cool exercise. Daryl's never done any casting. I certainly never saw anything this big to cast. So we got the idea that maybe we should cast the whole thing. So we did. We ran down to the dollar store. If you ever need Sasquatch tools, go to the Dollar Tree. It turns out that they're incredibly interested in Bigfoot as well. You can get garage sale signs like we did, and you can make a dam if it's on an angle like these were. And you can actually, because when you're casting at an angle, you got to make sure that the plaster or the hydrocal or the fix-it-all in this case doesn't fall down the slope. So we got a hold of everything we needed by like 11 o'clock at night. And so here's what we came up with. It was about 4 to 5 inches in depth. The direction was forward, uphill. It was leading kind of at an angle. There was a rounded and sharp edge to it all, horizontal tight lines. They were small, they seemed to be human-like, and coming right next to the actual impressions there was an elk track, and it did a 180 right in front of where these knees had landed, as though it had backtracked quickly and got out of there. So I thought that was interesting too. But it was still incredibly close to the gravel road, and that gravel road itself, didn't have a whole lot of traffic in it, except for guys like us. It turns out that there were some stick structures above where we found this, and we'll get back to that. So this is us actually pulling out the knee knockers, and yes, they do kind of look like breast, especially muddy breast. So these are the knee knockers here. Daryl's making light of it. And this is them after we excavated them. We had no way to bring out something that large. We weren't prepared for it, so we just found like a punky, forested, wildfired log that was kind of soft, and we rolled it like you would, if you're an EMT, you log roll something onto a rigid board. So we log rolled that over, brought it back, and we began to see all the animation that was coming out of it. And that area right there is extremely interesting. That's what the orthopedic surgeon was most interested in when we started bringing him pictures to look at. And the orthopedic surgeon said, these look like human knees. They're just way too big, what you're showing me. And there's another side view. Well, meanwhile, while all this uncovering is going on, Daryl and Cindy have kind of moved into the property. They're slowly getting to know the neighborhood. They're starting to, get to know all my weird friends because everyone's interested in what's going on in Cottage Grove. It's been over 7 years since the London tracks. It's kind of the last thing that I've done up that way that, got everybody involved with it. Here's a side view. There's a picture of a knee, and I'll show you why I have that there. Can I go back? There we go. I mean, there's areas within the right knee here that I think are indicative of showing why this matches pretty darn good with what a knee, especially down there in the crescent part of the knee, you can see what looks to be a patella and tendon folding. Meanwhile, all these hairs that we collected, we sent up to Canada. Now, if you're going to send hair out of country, it turns out it's kind of tricky because it's a biological. So Cindy Dosen works for the Olympic Project. She was willing to look at the hairs. We had them sent up to her via a Hanukkah card. We sent her a happy Hanukkah card and a gift card to Olive Garden. And within the Olive Garden gift card, there happened to fall 2 Sasquatch hairs. And I didn't know that at the time. We ended up finding out later via her coming on the live stream for one of these live events I do in Cottage Grove that yes, these were human-like hairs that didn't match anything else in the record books. So there's the final image that I put together there. And maybe that was reckless of me to, marry something together like that, but I think it kind of matches. We just don't know yet. It seems to be an appendage of some kind. So there's some skin folds on the kneecaps. There's a close-up of it. And then here's a black light that's coming down over the top of the knee there. You can start to see what looks like dermals or skin folds. And then here's a little video. Let's see if we don't even worry about that. Okay. Vera, will you be my light? Yeah. Okay. So what I want is just straight light down in there. The brighter the better. Okay, we're going to try to extract some hairs here. There's the dollar store glove. That's a dishwasher's glove from the dollar store. That's what we come up with tonight. Okay. Now remember, we're just doing this for the fun of it.
Probably making a shadow.
So I really don't think this is what it might be.
Edge. Shine a light right here for me, guys, where I'm doing. There's one.
Cindy's holding the camera. It's like 11:30 at night.
Not real well.
Okay, there's a little one.
A little bit, yeah, I saw it.
Okay. So you put it in a paper envelope so it doesn't mold or mildew. If you have anything that's paper, put your hair on that
there it is
first.
down in there. Now shine a light again. Ooh, look at that big one, guys.
Oh my gosh, that's a good one.
Whoa!
Oh!
See that one?
Wow!
I'm telling you, it's Robin Williams. All right. Keep shining.
The ghost of Robin Williams up in the mountains. Now, while this was all going on, we were hearing howls in the background, and it's a full moon. I mean, it's something like out of a comic book, right? Here you're hearing howls, you're casting maybe Sasquatch and the impressions underneath a full moon. Consequently, it's called the owl moon. That's one of the names for that particular moon. That's how we came up. If you have the chance to name a print, Thom Powell always told me, name it after the land, name it after the locals, name it after the area. The Sasquatch like that. They don't want you naming it after you, because then you just, appear like a dick. So I said, okay, all right, I'll do that. We'll name it after the moon. So here's an example of the hair. That's one of them still inside the casting. We still go back there periodically and find plaster chunks. And we actually found a hair and gave a plaster chunk to a guy from Bend that came over. Hair analysis on it there. Hair is naturally worn, not cut, measured an inch long. If you look at it visually, it's a black hair, but you get in close, it's an Irish setter red. Body part, she said, was from a lower limb. She could tell that, I don't know how. And the conclusions, living animal, all known animals ruled out, unknown hair type. What was interesting about it is she said, if you go back to that site, see if there's a big tree in front of there. And lo and behold, the direction this was headed was towards a huge Doug fir tree right on top of the platform. She said, look in that tree. Maybe that thing was leaping and it was going into that tree. And I thought, okay. So that's where we found the secondary hairs. And they're about 5 feet up in the Doug fir. There were no branches for it to hold on to. If it was a Sasquatch, it bear hugged it and went up or did whatever it needed to do. So we recovered a lot of hair. And here's some close-up images of the hair. When you're looking at a Sasquatch hair, potentially it's the medulla that they're mostly interested in and the lack thereof, because it's kind of shattered in the core from what I understand. There's kind of a stair-stepping, so it's almost human. Okay, so let's talk about what happened next. After we secured these knees, I went into kind of builder mode. Aaron can testify to that. And I decided to move into the property for a period of about 90 days. I had a chance to build Ron Biggie, but I needed a place to do it because I live in a little tiny 16-foot trailer in a trailer park, and it wasn't going to happen there. So they moved into this house and they finished this beautiful shop. I mean, it's a nice big, you could put a fire engine in it. It's a beautiful brand new shop. And there's my trailer. And as soon as I started to move in, things started to show up. Well, one of the first things that showed up was when Daryl went on a hike. I think I was out truck driving, and he went on a hike, and he was on the phone with me, actually, now that I think about it. And he was saying he was thirsty, and his dog in particular, Izzy, was thirsty. So he's out on a hike, and he came back on a single trail, and came back and said, Toby, there's a thermos laying in the middle of the trail. I think someone's following me. And I said, okay, what does it look like? So he sent me this picture, came back home and checked it out. Now this is a lot like what the story I told you earlier yesterday, or the day before, regarding what Todd Bailey had found with the tennis shoes that had moss on them. So this was an aged Coleman cooler sitting in the dead middle of the trailer, and my mind was already working like, okay, here we go, this stuff could actually happen, but yet it's not on the property, it's up in the mountains. Well, if you look down by the tire there, one day I come home, and there is a little tiny stick that I found out in the Clackamas Valley. It's got a honed, blunt edge. It's got a honed tip and a blunt edge at the back. It's sitting down there by the tires, and it just was sitting there by the barbecue grill. Well, I come home and I find a long stick with a blunt and a honed tip. And it's pretty close to where this other stick is. Now, it took me a second to maybe put two and two together, but I thought Daryl just got me a walking stick. So things started to really spiral. Each day, there was what seemed to be a new gift. On the top of the trailer there, we found what looked like a piece of burned Palo Santo wood, and it was just sitting right at the tip there. Let me see if I can go to the next one. I went fishing one day. That day I came back with my son. There's a bobber in front of the trailer. There's the actual piece of the wood down there in our hands. The next day there's a piece of carnelian stone. Every day, and it wouldn't matter whether or not it was day or night, you could turn your back maybe 15 minutes later and find a carnelian stone sitting on the hood of your car, or a toy, or whatever. Then the signs started to show up. Now this one is pretty close. You can see there I put a mailbox to see if they want to come get some mail from me. They never did. So we found some scratches right in front of the door. Now they're three about 12-inch long vertical scratches, evenly processed in the gravel. Consequently, everything around the house is gravel. And I think that's an important detail as far as us being allowed to record. They were cool with us setting out recorders, and we did a lot of it. But as far as hearing an approach of something, not a lot of that happening, and gravel everywhere. So these three scratches, we found those. I don't quite remember the time and day. I don't know what they meant. It looked like a three-clawed bald eagle landed on one leg and quickly flew up in the air. I don't know what that means. Well, as we were recording, we started to hear things get, we thought, thrown. I mean, we saw evidence in the back of the trailer, what looks like rocks denting the back of the trailer. So I just assumed, since I work graveyard shift, that they were off in the wood line, chucking rocks, making dents happen, and I don't know if that's particularly the case, and I'll get back to what I think may be going on in that, but there were dents and things that appeared to be thrown at the back of the trailer. And we did end up finding hair in one of the creases there that was kind of reddish black. So it was about 4 feet up within one of the little metal grooves. That is a barefoot print. It's a small one, probably about 10 inches. I don't know if you can see the toes. Can you guys see that it's a right foot with a big toe and smaller toes? And there's Biggie slowly getting built. That's the fiberglass going over the chicken wire. And that's one of the hairs I just told you about. It was kind of bent, but we went ahead and collected it. We still have all these. We can get Cindy Dosen to test this hair. Okay,
Which she'll have
slowly
to
roll
do.
to it.
Go, you were camera.
That's the same kind of hair there. Would you agree it looks kind of the same?
Yeah, do you want me to film it?
Yeah.
Oh, it's gone. I don't need to.
Can you get it on there?
Isn't it?
Okay, so another clean chain of custody here.
You know, we're just ready for this to end abruptly, like the phenomena to end, for us to be wrong, you know, for this to go on and on like it did.
I'm gonna grab it right by the
Really, it just shocked me. So if you can hear me excited, it's because I feel like it's the last time it's ever going to happen. And it's probably going to blow off into the breeze, and I'm never going to see another hair again.
Put it up against that.
You can't see it very well. No idea.
Yeah, now that's quite a bit longer than the ones we found in the, which would make sense if you had an arm hair or something attached here where maybe there's more hair flow coming off here. That would make sense compared to something that gets rubbed a lot like an extremity. Well, they started to come in closer. And they seemed to be incredibly interested in the garage. We would find the doors opened. We would find toys in the garage. And this is a locked garage, which gets quickly into the paranormal. We also found handprints, and if you had a chance to stop by the booth, there's an example. This is a brand new paint job too. It's about 2 weeks old at this point. And here we're finding dirty handprints up at the edge. In fact, the fingers, about 6 feet up, were curled upwards, pressing up on the door shim. And let's see here. Here's some video of
All
that.
right, so Daryl just mentioned that he found something new here he hadn't seen before. And it all starts in this door.
You see the fingers there, how they're lifting up?
Our fingerprints here.
Now it's an oil-based
Thom.
fingerprint. And
Thom.
we see this
Thom.
again in this phenomenon.
Way up there. And then right here that's an entire hand there. And then look at this. These are fresh scratch marks. I mean, this probably.
Now we ruled out those scratch marks as being my keys,
It looks like it's got
because I had them attached improperly and they actually scratched the paint. But we couldn't rule those out. They seemed too
Well,
large.
you're not even getting dirty. You know what I mean?
No, I mean that, but I mean, when I unlock the door, I'm
Yeah.
like this.
Right, you're like that, but I'm the klutz, so.
I never use my right hand.
Well, then the fingerprints showed up on the bed of the truck. And what had happened is over the passenger side of the bed of the truck, something reached over from the passenger side, went over to the driver's side of the bed, left these 4 long greasy fingertips, grabbed the spider netting, which is like the bungee cord, broke it off its plastic snaps, and threw it out in the gravel yard. And we thought, okay, that's definitely impressive, you know, something with a really long arm span with giant fingers is interested in this little contraption you have here, maybe kind of irritated, maybe it snapped back and hit him, I don't know. That one you can't really see too well, but he's pointing to where the rounded edges of it are. And again, you know, at-home data collection stuff, we had no fingerprint lifting kit. We literally using construction chalk that you'd use out of a chalk line that you snap on a 2x4. And I ran down and got some feathery painter brushes. At one point, I think we even used peacock feathers to dust it on there. Peacocks! Go peacocks! All right.
Okay, what we're showing right now are these finger strikes on the back of the pickup truck where the spider net.
This was wet when we found them. The whole car had just rained, so you could see them a lot
Fingers
better.
coming across the bed of the truck this way, which is a weird angle.
But you can see the round tips
Yeah,
of them
You can
right
see how
here.
they're at an angle.
Perfectly. I don't know what this little.
Now there you go. There you can see them
Oh,
pretty good.
Yeah, this is a good angle right here. To get an appreciation for it. See if I can count them off. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. Is that 1, 2,
This is 4, right?
3?
Yeah, we ended up with 4. I learned to count later. Okay, now that's them. That's after we dusted them. You can plainly see that there's 4 of them. And of course, in comparison, they're way out of scope for a human hand. So what could be doing this? Like, is this an elaborate hoax, right? Could it be the farmer down the road that sees what he calls a blue-eyed bear on 2 legs approaching him towards his house? That'd be weird if he wanted to hoax us after he told us he saw a blue-eyed bear approach him, but maybe it's Wormy. That's what we call the guy because he raises worms. And He also sees a giant glowing chandelier, which he calls a drone. He says this chandelier just comes down, it must be a Weyerhaeuser drone, and it follows me around at night, and it looks like a beautiful chandelier. We would see him out at all hours, waiting for the chandelier to approach. He didn't talk a lot, but when he talked, it was mainly about anything other than the weird. He wanted to talk about the worms. Then stuff started to show up in the house. This house was sold really quickly for about 40 grand less than it should have sold. It was from a family that lived there. They raised a family there, I think until the kid was like 21. And then they all moved suddenly, only about 45 minutes down the road. Cindy and Daryl bought it immediately. And this was during like the housing peak in Cottage Grove. So once they moved in, they began to notice, the house was pretty clean. They took care of the house, washed it all down. But one day, they walked in the back bedroom there, and you close the door, and there's these chalky white handprints. Now, you can see that they're kind of milky white ones up at the top. That's what we noticed initially. And they are kind of gnarled and bent, right? They're weird. And if you had a chance to see them yesterday, you could see up close that they're weird, especially that gappage in between them. So we dusted those with our dollar store tools, and we didn't know what to do with this stuff. We thought, well, let's just start collecting stuff. The weirder it is, the better, I guess. Oh, I guess I just had a little clip there. But they matched what Daryl Sims, the alien hunter, was calling people that have abductee or contactee experiences. And they're, in particular, the one from Dallas, Texas, they seem to be a strong match for that one there, as far as I was concerned. And the middle one, is off of a glass window. So this milky white handprint thing started to show up. At one point, within the last year, I think it was like more than, maybe only like 3 months ago, I woke up and had a white chalky handprint on my hairline. I just woke up, looked in the mirror, and there was a white chalky handprint right on the top of my head. Now, I don't remember anything weird about that night. I don't remember, having a nightmare, but these handprints have shown up other places as well, this chalky white material. And I don't know if Pearl Peralta is here, but she has a theory about this white chalky substance and what it may be used for, so maybe we can talk to her later about that. Let's go. Okay, there's an example. There they are after we dusted them. Okay, so property damage. Around the house, things started to get damaged. Now this is a brand new shop, probably less than a month old at this point. And if you look up here at the rain gutter, and you look at the top there at the left, you can see that it's kind of been pinched. Well, that's about, I'm going to measure it here for you shortly. It's about 8.5 feet up at least, where this thing had been creased and pinched.
Showing the height of the damage to the pipe. And here is a speck of mud or grease, another speck of mud or grease.
Yeah, so that wasn't there before. Then we noticed there's the trailer, it's pretty small, and we had to run a power cord out to the trailer to give me power. And in the middle there was going to be a Sasquatch sculpture I was going to carve, wood carving. And so that's waiting to be done. But as I ran the cord out here, one day I came out and I found these giant wet spots. And they were all along the cord. Let me see if there's a better picture. They're quite large. And they were sprayed right where the cord was. And there's a trailing into it. I would probably think that would be the end of where things kind of gathered up at the feet. So we gathered those rocks. Did it have a smell to it? No, not really at that point. It didn't smell like cat, it didn't smell like bear. It didn't really smell at that point for whatever reason. All I know is it wasn't there that night, it was there in the morning. And here's an example of some of the things that would show up on the property. In particular, the one that looks like a hand is a personal glyph that I leave out in the woods. That showed up below the hummingbird feeder. There's those 3 scratches that I showed you early. This stick's signature here is one that shows up all the time. What happened was, up against the shop wall there, things started to appear in a certain 5-foot area between the gravel wall and the inside of the shop. And 4 sticks were always used. They only used these 4 sticks. And so I would take the little things apart that they made, whatever they are, think I know, and each day they would build them, or I'd put objects around them. If you ever want to test the glyph to see if it's an actual glyph, we decided, well, let's put stuff in and around it. That way we know if they mess with the objects within the glyph area, we know that it's not natural, that this is man-made. So one of the things we used are these sizzle ball magnets, and they make a real distinctive, weird sound when you throw them in the air and they collect. Well, when you have a recorder out and you hear that sizzle ball magnet sound, you know something has thrown them. In a lot of cases, these sounds would happen, the magnets would be right back where we left them or slightly adjusted. So I don't know if that was mimicry or if they were actually using those things or playing with them.
You're a hazard.
That's a short video, isn't it? Weird writing above the house. This is some of the, I guess you'd call it archaic stick writing within the mud near where we found the moon prints. Now, within it is a boot print, unfortunately, but we don't know what this is. I mean, it could be nothing. Like I said, we were taking notes on everything, but it was interesting enough. It was close enough to where we had found the knee impression, so we took a picture of that. I don't know if anybody has seen any mud writing at all. I've heard of one case where someone saw a Sasquatch writing in the mud. Arla? Yeah, okay. So we're coming to the final stages of building Biggie. And you know, you have to build the terraform, which is the mossy, realistic part that Biggie was standing on. And I thought, gosh, what better than to represent the rabbit hole by putting an actual rabbit, you know, within the terraform here. I'm going so deep down this Alice in Wonderland world. And we all agreed, yeah, let's go get a taxidermied rabbit. That would be like awesome. So we went on the internet, checked it out. We're getting ready to order a little rabbit. And there's Daryl standing in front of Biggie. Instead, what happened is the next day, I came home after work around 1 o'clock in the afternoon, and this is what I said.
Oh my.
Now, I've been asking for a buddy.
Oh my gosh, that was not there earlier.
It's not even injured. That's what I call ultimate a wild animal.
No?
And I bet if we look here on the other side, we won't see any injuries. We did. We found a rock, a little tiny one, maybe, you know, nothing big, sticking out right below the ears there. And then rigor mortis had just started to set in. But this is like a hot July day. There should be bugs, meat bees, everything circling this animal, and there just wasn't. It did happen right after we found it, they hit it. And maybe that was from flipping it over and exposing some of the, you know, grossness. Well, after we found the rabbit, I had a pretty tough time dealing with that fact that, hey, they're listening and then now they're bringing me dead things. But I was looking for a dead thing, you know. I was willing to go over the internet and get one. They brought me a better version of it, I figure. But because it was dead, I just kind of got weirded out by the whole thing. And I could see why people don't get involved with this subject because, I mean, you press down on the gas pedal hard enough, you're going to get some incredible thrills. And this was a thrill. And so we were talking about that. And I ended up throwing the rabbit in the creek bed. And I said, listen, no more. Let's take a break. I need to start from the beginning here. This is getting real quick. And I said, you know, God, thank God they didn't bring me snakes. Daryl says, yeah, because you hate snakes. And I said, yeah, I would just totally lose it if they brought me a snake. Well, 3 days later, they brought me a snake.
Yes. See where the dirt's moved?
Not a bug on this.
The worst thing you
Mid-July.
could bring me, it was a snake. And they bought one.
At least it wasn't a person.
Right. Well, I like people, thank
This is a
God.
little redwood seal. And this is exactly where the rabbit was thrown. And you can see by the disturbed area right here, this is where I put the little marker and the candle.
Yeah, we did a little grave for the rabbit.
There is no coincidences going on today.
The head's sitting off about 6 inches from the corner there. So I saved that. I put it in an
Alright, well,
Altoid tin.
I mean, at least
and
you're
kept it.
confirming you're still around, but please bring me the rabbit back instead of this.
I just got here, those meat bees would have been like covering.
All right. So it just continued to go deeper down the rabbit hole here. One day I get a phone call from Daryl that on top of this log was a white stone. I think I'm in Tacoma when he called, and I said, Daryl, I can't talk right now. I got Jude on the other phone here, and he's having some weird stuff go on at his own house. Now Jude lives, my son, about 20 minutes away, and he's had a pretty paranormal history his whole entire childhood. And before Daryl hung up, I was like, take a picture of it so we can identify that rock later in case something happens to it. He goes, okay, I gotta go get a haircut. He went and got his haircut, took a picture, and it has a distinctive mark at the top of it here. You can't really see it too well from where you are, but at the top of the stone is a little dimple. And Daryl made note of that. He goes, there's like a fast cooling dimple on top of this white stone. I'll recognize it if I find it. Well, it was gone when he got back from his haircut. And when it went away, and it was gone, I decided to call my son. And I knew his history with stuff. And I said, Jude, I know this is going to sound strange, but I feel like you should go around the house and just take your camera, and I want you to film around the outside of the house and the inside of the house, but I want you to look for an orange rock. And the reason I said an orange rock is because I wanted to really know that he found a white rock potentially. So he's looking for a carnelian stone. Instead, with his iPhone, this is what he finds. 30 minutes away, maybe it would have taken, it would have taken a miracle for this to fly through the air on its own.
Okay. So this is the bathroom, and you told me to come in and look. Oh my gosh.
So that stone he put inside a little tin can, and periodically when he would shake the can, the stone would be gone. You come back, you shake the can, the stone would be there. So that's an apportation. I guess that might be some kind of proof of it happening.
I'm keeping the agate in here.
Well, I still am in the mode, like if someone's trying to trick us here and play mind games, I'm gonna set out my FLIR camera, forget about it. I'll just put it through the vent in the trailer and I'll do little night ops. I'll catch them, I'll see what happens. We know that there's a tweaker neighbor down the road and maybe wormy, sniff too many worms. And so the only footage that we ever got was a cougar walking down the road. There's a thermal of a cougar taking an evening stroll. You can see the long tail. He's quite large, actually. He was a big boy.
What's that orange?
Yeah, so the orange area is just the heat coming off of the backside of the woods there. It's providing its own little heat source. And you can see that the cougar itself has a hot patch as he's walking by and there with the neighbor. Then we set out a game cam. And this is one of the images from the game cam. Now, there were 3 pictures taken that night, 63 degrees on August 16th. And at the bottom right, you can see actually let's start with the top right. There's a light that starts to approach from the ground. And then it moves up, takes another picture, and then this image appears. Now we try to debunk this as being a headlight that belongs to a truck, but we can't see that that's a truck in any way. It seems to be too large, it's coming in at the wrong angle. It should be, if it was coming in from that angle, it might be coming in from the tree line, which there's no road. So that's another weird shot. Then I think over like 44 pictures burst on this game cam. And if you look down here, this was 8:34 p.m. to 8:35 p.m. See how the temperature strikes up differently? It goes from 54 degrees to 61 degrees in a matter of a minute. And as you look at these strikes of green flowing what appear to be hair, in my opinion, it looks as though something hairy standing right in front of the lens. And one of the shots here that didn't make it onto my presentation was a rounded area off to the left that looked like it might have been indicative of a nipple. And so whatever was there was about this tall when it did it. It stood in front of the lens for a period of time and the temperature went up significantly. It's just one of those things. Property damage started to happen. I talked to a long-term witness. She's like, well, if they're doing property damage, chances are that they're probably teenagers. And if they're teenagers, you need to treat them like teenagers. Just tell them not to do it anymore, but be real rough when you do it. So I went and had a talk with the woods. This is an example of them popping a fence. This happened during a night walk. When we were out on a night walk, we heard a whoop right in front of Daryl's house. And then we found that fence broken, so it appeared as though something was standing behind that fence and then jerked back. But this also happened a couple nights earlier. It might be looped here. Just a typical, what you would want to hear, Bigfoot yell. Now, is that somebody in the mountains there above the London tracks trying to elicit Sasquatch behavior? Could be. But there was significant fence damage too. The T-posts were being bent down, and if you know anything about how thick and broad a T-post is, to bend one down 30 degrees takes some work, and they were being pried apart from the actual fence. So what you're going to hear is us with a parabolic aimed out towards the power lines in the apple orchard, and this is where a lot of the sounds, the weirder sounds, would come. And you're going to hear something walk up like an elephant. It's going to vocalize, and you're going to hear a possible word within this vocalization and a grunt, and then it's going to slap the fence or walk over it or pull it. I don't know. I'm going to turn it up so you can feel it. So maybe it was walking through the yard there over the fence and caught itself. We don't know, but we sent it to Dave Ellis. He hears vocalizations in there that are kind of indicative of this percussive quality that you're looking for. Yes?
So what do you use for audio? So you have a game cam and a flirt. And
Rarely we use those things. Mainly, we felt like we were given permission to use a recorder. Because they did not mind us putting out a simple recorder and a parabolic dish in the backyard. So we would just simply use this little recorder here. I'd set it right out in front in the open so they could see it. And they never seemed to mind it. They certainly never damaged it. A lot of this property damage, I think, was accidental, but maybe this one wasn't. There was a screen here that they pinched up about 6 feet. It was pried open. There was also a finger mark down at the bottom there where a finger was pushed through. And this was out of the room with the Chucky handprints. This is, I think this was with my recorder. This sounds an awful lot like Scooby-Doo, so we call this the Scooby-Doo laugh. And so the blackberry season came along. I still have the recorder sitting out pretty much every day. And we would find, I would be sleeping, I would hear something approaching, right? I'd peek out, there'd be nothing there. I'd hear more footsteps because I was listening through, I'd just plug in the earbuds and listen. Well, after I left for work, I checked the recorder, and I saw these blackberries sitting by the recorder. They're kind of spread out, headed out towards the tree line. And I looked up, and I saw blackberry juice about 7 feet up on the underneath of the awning, squirted. I didn't make any sense. So I went to the recorder. Well, now it made a lot of sense. This is the blackberry sneeze. You can hear it chew a little bit there. So I figured that was the point where this happened. Other weird sounds started to show. It wasn't just Bigfoot stuff. There was also these other sounds that mimicked EVPs. This sound showed up an awful lot, and it's not the clicking sound, which we have a lot of that clicking and such, but this one sounded a lot like a rolling stone wheel. And I'd heard of this before in haunting cases. So this is the stone crypt. I hope it translates. Now you can never hear this with your own ears. You have to have some other amplitude device in order to pick it, but it seemed to be coming from the general area of the orchard up on the hillside there past the power lines. And it would happen only in the evening, and it was usually about that short. One of the last ones we got off the property before I left, actually this one was just discovered this year, was the classic EVP. It turns out that the garage seemed incredibly haunted. We were using dowsing rods to see where the prime points of interest were, and it was always where that glyph was. You know, wherever they were leaving the glyph up against the wall is where we'd leave the recorder. So this is an example of one of the EVPs. You're going to hear all of a sudden layered voices of men all screaming at once, and listen to the very end for English. Now what I hear at the end there is a voice that says, now is there any reason?